Hi, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Marcus, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different while being a little bit more of the same. We're going to be taking a look at 3 different Balisongs that I was going to do reviews on, but for whatever reason didn't. Whether that's a case of the footage went bad or was corrupted rather and didn't save correctly, or I just didn't really have time to fill a proper review on it. It was really more just thoughts, but even looser than my regular thought videos, or just kind of didn't feel like I had anything extra to contribute. These didn't get full reviews. So we're gonna take a look at some of the footage that I do have, some of the flipping, which is older flipping footage, and as usual, it's first person without a GoPro, so it's not the most amazing flipping, but my flipping has been improving. We'll see that later. So either way, we're gonna take a look at these knives. And I'm just gonna kind of give some brief thoughts on them, and that'll be that. But before we get into it, if there's any interest, I will be doing a Nautilus review, if there's enough interest in it. If people don't want to hear my thoughts on the Nautilus, then I'm not gonna bother with a review for it. It's been a fun trainer, so if that's all you want to hear, then that's what it is. The Nautilus is a fun trainer. And then the raffle has ended, so please, I've gotten a few DMs about it. Please don't DM me about the raffle. It's done. It's over. Thank you so much for everyone that participated. It was really great seeing someone who doesn't have a ton of, Balisong, doesn't have any real grails. It was really neat seeing someone win a very high-end knife. It was really kind of heartwarming, I guess, is a really good way to put it. And then last but not least, I managed to pick up another Serif directly from Machinewise. And it came with the new box and everything, which is phenomenal. It's such a nice box. The 3D printed, double containers. It comes with extra washers now. The hinges are all part of it. It's really cool. But the previous Serif I had was not a brand new from Machinewise Serif. It was a secondhand Serif. So not that there's anything wrong with that, but I always feel weird kind of talking about knives tolerances and in general quality when I don't know what they were like brand new. So that Serif had a smidge of play that I was like, I don't super love this. It's not as good as the Tsunami, but this Serif, as you can see, has just absolutely rock solid tolerances. I've done literally nothing to the knife. That's really forcing it right there. Just great tolerances, really so much better. The other one had great tolerances, don't get me wrong, but they're even crisper and just as close to perfect as you can really get, and I'm absolutely having a blast with it. I really do like the Serif. I know I went over it with the comparison video between the Serif and the Tsunami, but if people want a more in-depth video, there's a fly there. I'd be more than happy to really get into it and talk about the Serif with a bit more depth, maybe do a full, take it apart and really get into it. If there's interest in that, then please leave it in the comments. Sorry, I keep showing this flyway. If there's interest in that, please leave it in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. If there's not interest and people are fine with what I've done, then that's cool too. But wow, I really love the distressed purple anodization that Machinewise did. It really gives more of a iridescent blurple-y vibe to it, especially you can see it in the checkerboard bit and the handles. I'm super, super impressed with this anodization. I absolutely love the way this one looks. Just the way the light hits it, it is hard not to look at this knife. And I got really lucky. Got my a number, more or less a lucky number for me, 216. Mostly because at A&M, where I went to school, Gig'em Aggies, a whoop. Your class number is a big deal. So I was class of 2016, and so getting 216 is just kind of a neat little coincidence, and I'm really happy with that. On top of the anodization being essentially my favorite color that you can do. Tolerance has been great. I've had a blast with this. And this intro is going on longer than I really wanted it to. So without further ado, we're going to be looking at the stitch steel paradigm, the Bally Knives or Vyce Knives Telesto, whatever you want to call the maker. He keeps saying, oh, I'm going to change my name on Instagram, but he hasn't. So the Telesto, and then last but not least, the Fellowship Blades Medusa. I'll do flipping footage first, and then I'll do video afterwards with my thoughts. So here we go. Let's take a look at those. right, so that was the stitched steel paradigm. That was loaned to me as part of a pass around, so that's not my knife. So I didn't do anything too wild with it. I didn't spend a lot of time with it. I didn't carry it. I just did a couple little tests, played around with it a little bit. And so these are really loose thoughts, but I really loved the paradigm. I thought it was absolutely incredible. There's so many things about it that just make it next level. It was razor sharp, and that was despite the fact that I was, I think, 5th or 6th in line on this pass around. It had been flipped, and that, you know, I don't know how it was dropped. I don't know how it was handled, but it was still just an absolute razor, which I appreciate. On top of that, the tolerances were great. And aesthetically, the knife is so cool. The whole pattern is really nicely done. It gives really great grip. The blackened titanium handles just felt phenomenal. They're nicely just rounded without being too round. The grip is great. The whole pattern looks really nice. And the blade is a really cool, exaggerated Tonto style blade with that nice little cutout in it to kind of help reduce some weight and also just give it a really nice visual flair. It is one of the coolest looking Balisongs, without a doubt. The other thing that's really nice about it, that one, for example, had Damascus blade with blackened titanium handles. But if you're on Stitch's books, you can really go wild with it, right? You can get just plain raw titanium with a S35 VM blade all the way to Damascus handles, or Mokutai handles rather, with a full Damascus blade. You just get the full dress knife. The whole experience is really cool. The thing that really makes Stitch's knives unique and sets them apart is that everything is done by hand. There's no CNC, you know, just I'm gonna let this machine run. He does everything by hand, from, you know, cutting the blade or getting the grind on the blades to shaping the titanium to drilling the holes. Everything is completely done by hand. It is really just phenomenal, the amount of work and artistry that goes into making any one of his Balisongs, whether it's the Alien or the Paradigm. And it really sets them apart from what the kind of standard is right now. So it's really hard to say anything negative about it. That one had a little bit more play than I typically like, but again, it's hard to tell what the baseline is versus what happened because it's been used by 7 different people at who knows how hard of a level they beat the knife. The tang pins are really nice. It's got a kind of muted, minimally bouncy, springy noise to it. Stitch has said that he's not a huge fan of really loud knives, and that's a whole nother video topic, honestly, that I could get into, is Balisong sound, as seen by how loud that can be. So Balisong sound is not what he goes for. But it still has a really nice kind of subtle, springy sound to it. The tang pins feel really great. I really don't have anything bad to say about it, except for there was a smidge more play than I typically prefer, but it was still just phenomenally tuned bushings. It had no tap, gorgeously made. Again, all handmade. They are expensive, but really, for the fact that you're getting a fully handmade knife, almost a bargain. But working with Stitch, you also get to see just how expensive the raw materials are, which I think some people kind of forget about when they discuss Balisong price. Regardless of whether it's Squid Industries making something, or Machinewise, or Stitch, or JK, whoever, the materials alone are expensive, and that is me diverging off that again. So that's a Paradigm. I really liked it. And on to the next knife. Oh, that was a bad transition, maybe? We'll see. I'll probably leave it in. All right, that was the Fellowship Blades Medusa. That is kind of a mid-tier, as far as, you know, titanium knives go, that's kind of a mid-tier Balisong. It's in the 450 to 550 range, first hand, if I remember correctly. And so kind of in the same price range as the Machinewise Slifty or the Jimpy Sentinel, although the Sentinel now has its secondhand market only, and it's a little bit more expensive than I think is really reasonable, but that's neither here nor there. Otherwise, I'll get sucked off onto another tangent. So that's the Medusa, and it's cool. I don't really have much to say about it, which is why I didn't really include it in the video. It had really nice tolerances. It had a really nice ring. The blade is a really kind of unique cleaver, Tonto looking thing, which I think is cool. It handled nicely. It kind of felt similar to maybe an Orca or a Monarch, kind of, but like not really. I don't really know what to compare it to. I think if I remember right, it was one of those two that it felt the most similar to in my mind. Didn't spend a huge amount of time with it. The one I received was secondhand, and so the blade was chipped and dinged and dull, so I didn't hang on to it for very long. I wouldn't have minded if I might have kept it if I'd had one that was brand new, but this one was in bad enough shape that I couldn't hang on to it, and so I think I sold it back to the original owner. I think it was temporarily on loan, but he was part of a trade deal. Doesn't matter. That's not the point. So it was nice. It flipped nice. It had a good sound, good bushings, a really unique blade design. The handles were a little bit rougher on the edges than I think is really comfortable for flipping. Although I believe in the new Medusas that's actually been addressed and they've kind of smoothed it out and rounded it down a little bit. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what Grant has said he's done for the next and continuing batches of Medusa knives. So overall, I thought it was cool. It's really nice for the price. It's a unique design. It felt really nice. It had a nice ring to it, but overall it was just kind of, it didn't stand out in any one way or the other. I think that the hype for them is much higher than it needs to be, especially given their availability, and some of the secondhand prices I've seen have been, especially around the time that I was trying this one, were insane. They're a little bit more reasonable now because now it's serifs are the secondhand thing that everyone's going nuts for, and tsunamis still, but it was cool. Again, the handles could have used a little bit more finishing just to make them feel a little better. They didn't have any ano options at that time. I think they're slowly starting to introduce some anodization features so that you don't just have a raw knife, which some people like. I personally prefer my knives to have a pop of color. I think that's one of the neat things about titanium is all the anodizations that people can do. I think it really kind of takes Balisongs to kind of like the next level and makes it a little bit more unique, despite the fact that they're already a really unique design. So that's it. That's all I got to say about that one. Hopefully this next segment's not too long, because we are going to be looking at the Telesto. All right, that was the Telesto from Forrest or Bally Knives or Vyce Knives or whatever the actual knife maker is called. His name is Forrest, his account is Bally Knives. Some of his things have said Vyce Knives, but the account's never changed, so kind of not sure where to land on that. I personally, I don't know how I feel about the Telesto, and I think there's a lot of really cool aspects of it, and there's a lot of things that I really was frustrated by. But overall, I think the Telesto is one of the knives that has the most hype and one of the lowest amounts of worth. It is, especially from American-made knife Balisong makers. Obviously, you all probably are aware of my least favorite Balisong maker and why I think all of those knives are way fucking overhyped. But the Telesto is essentially the American equivalent, in my mind at this point, of the knives that shall not be named. It is Pretty pricey firsthand, but not too bad. Less than $1,000, which some people, if you're new here, you might be here like, oh my God, it's less than $1,000. That's still expensive. It is, but it's not as expensive as something like an Orca or even the Telesto itself when you go into the secondhand markets. So that out of the way. Kind of the standard S35 VN steel blade, titanium handles. It's a channel Balisong, Zen pins, all that. It is just kind of a weird one. So, first of all, it is fucking long. Right, for example, if we're going to take something like a Nautilus, it's kind of like a standard Balisong sizing compared to something like the Serif, right? The Serif comes out as being a bit longer, right? Nothing too wild, but the Serif is a long, thin knife. The Telesto was longer than the Serif. It was fucking long, which is really unique looking, but makes it kind of unwieldy. On top of that length, it was weirdly balanced and kind of light. It almost felt too floaty, and it didn't carry momentum particularly well, in my opinion, which is kind of a downside. But you know, that's a personal preference thing, so I'm not necessarily going to hold that against the Telesto. It had a design that some people think is kind of plain looking. I think it's very sleek and kind of minimalistic. The newer versions have jimping, which I think is good for the knife, bad for the aesthetics of the knife. The jimping really is I have not seen jimping that looks this bad, right? Telesto jimping, or not Telesto jimping, rather, Serif jimping, right? Very subtle. If you look at it from the side, you almost can't even tell that there's jimping, right? But it still gives you enough grip that I can kind of loosely hold this and shake it, inappropriate, without having to worry about it falling. But the jimping on the Telestos is god-awful looking, in my opinion. Mine didn't have jimping, which is another kind of issue. Like, I don't like when makers add something that major to a knife without kind of iterating to the next production level, right? If you were going to call it the Telesto like 2.0, fine, add jimping. But the fact that essentially the waitlist order, if you were later on the waitlist, you got a knife with an additional feature compared to people that were earlier on the waitlist, it just feels bad. Which is, again, weird because I think the jimping looks fucking atrocious on that knife. Anyways, back to the knife itself. The thing that really drew me to the Telesto was the sound. I'm conflicted about how I feel about knife sounds, right? Something like the Nautilus is quiet, and I appreciate that. Like, I'm making this make as much noise as I can make it make, and it gets a little bit noisy, but it's nowhere near as bad, especially if you're in a separate room. No one's going to hear it across the house. It's just not as annoying to listen to. And then something like the Serif has the clacks and the kind of that noise, and a lot of people find that really nice. I'm kind of just neutral on it. I think it's good in comparison to something like, especially the original Tsunami, which sounded cheap. This sounds solid and dependable, for lack of a better phrase, without really sounding too wild. The Telesto had a really beautiful ring. It was clearer and crisper than even the Planarian ring. It was really nice sounding, and that's what really kind of drew me in, is I do like a knife that has a nice ring to it. Otherwise, I kind of prefer anything, really. I'm not too picky. I don't need a knife to have a good ring to be great. That used to be the case where I used to like love that specifically, but as I've kind of grown and changed as a flipper or Balisong enthusiast or whatever you want to call me or yourself or whatever, the noise is less important. And so that ring still drew me in. It was still really neat, but it is too much of a focus of the knife. So it just kind of was fine. The issue I had was along the edge of the channel. It was not very well finished. It had kind of like a lot of sharp edges, right? So you see, like on the Serif is just what I have on hand right now. You can kind of see it's got corners, but they're just smooth and kind of finished in a way that it's not sharp. The Telesto corners were fucking sharp, and instead of 4 of them, the way the knife handle was finished, there were corners on corners. That was not my most eloquent sentence, and that's okay. This is already getting much longer. I should have made this on video, whatever. Really rough there. So it didn't feel super comfortable to hold. fanning felt kind of goofy and bad. It wasn't a pleasant feeling knife to hold. And then on top of that, I was really annoyed, right? You wait for a knife for a long time and you expect it to be finished, right? So right here on my Telesto, right along this upper little corner here, it was jagged and rough. Not like an intentional like hook design or anything like that. It was like the blade hadn't been finished here, or where it had been, you know, machined was just imperfect, and not in a way where I'm like, oh, that looks bad. Like you would snag on things, and it was noticeable, and it was really just kind of disappointing to have a knife that costs that much money that you wait on come out with some flaws. And from what I'd seen, some other people had some other issues as well. Mine, for example, had really great bushings, was really nicely tuned, but I saw someone had really undersized bushings in one handle and couldn't get rid of the tap and play that caused. And they made a post, and Forrest kind of got upset about it and kind of went on a little mini rant about people entering dirty laundry, which feels unprofessional. And I personally dealt with that lack of professionalism when I put my Telesto up for sale or trade, because at that time I was really looking to try a Serif, and the Telesto just wasn't doing it for me. And I think most Balisong makers are pretty aware of the fact that the secondhand market is what it is, and that's a very big part of the hobby. I'm personally moving out from that aspect of it. I have no plans of ever selling one of the knives that I own again. I really downsized my collection, and between Instagram's issues and just dealing with other people, I have no plan on selling my knives ever again. I will buy knives if they're from the makers or people that I've done business with before, but I'm not selling any more of my knives because it's a hassle. So either way, I put this knife up for sale on the Instagram sales tag, looking for a Serif because I really wanted to try a Serif. And I eventually got one, but the most frustrating thing about it was I received a message from Forrest saying, "This is a big fuck you to me," or something along those lines. I don't remember the exact line. I should have looked it up. I'll probably add it into the description. But basically saying, "This is a big fuck you." And I was just fucking baffled, right? I was looking for a knife to try, and I was looking to part with a knife that just wasn't doing it for me, that I didn't enjoy, that I thought was kind of sloppily finished and just didn't feel right. And instead I got a message from the guy that made the knife basically saying, "Fuck you," which that doesn't make me want to keep the knife. That doesn't make me love the knife more. It just makes me kind of sour on the whole experience. So I talked to him a bit more, and there's a bit of history in there that makes it a little bit more reasonable, but it's not really an excuse to essentially tell someone, "Fuck you" for selling my knife, because that's not like what. So that was really unpleasant. So, and there were some other issues that I saw happen across the board where people just had some issues dealing with Forrest and some kind of personality clashes that happened a lot, especially when compared to other knife makers. So that kind of, again, sours my whole perception on this. But overall, I think the Telesto was really overrated. Now that we're running into 10 minutes of me talking about the Telesto, this really could have just been its own review. The Telesto, I think, was really overrated for the price. I see them every now and then still in the secondhand market going for prices that I think are so much more than what they need to be. They're barely worth retail, and that's simply because of the cost of materials. But the fact that I've seen them go for close to double retail is insane to me. They are not worth it. They're not a good enough flipper. The customer experience is not good enough to be worth that price. It was a very mediocre knife that is more expensive than it needs to be. And it was probably the most disappointing knife that I've flipped ever. It wasn't bad, it just was disappointing. Okay, well, that was 11 minutes instead of 6 or 5, so that was quite a bit more than I wanted. That'll probably be it. I think upcoming videos, I will have a full stitched steel paradigm review coming in the next few months. I love the one that I got to try enough in that past round that I actually reached out and managed to somehow get on the books, and I will actually have my own coming pretty soon. And by soon, I mean within the next 3 to 4 months. Again, it's handmade, takes some time. So that'll be coming. I will be doing a Balisong lube review. I've tried a couple different brands at this point. NRB, KPL, FBO, Kanto Group. So I'll probably be doing a little oil review. I might go into more detail on the Serif and kind of do a breakdown. I might do a Nautilus review. I'm also considering doing a Balisong maker tier list. As I was thinking about this, I've really enjoyed working with some people, and I think some people are just great overall with a great business model, you know, great product, great everything. And then obviously there's the Ryworkses of the group that are bad, but I don't want to just shit on people that I don't like. So I'd have to put a little bit more work into making that video work. So oil reviews, kind of a comparison, maybe even a taste test. Please don't make me do a taste test. Oil reviews, Balisong maker tier list, maybe some Serif stuff, maybe some very, very, very basic things that I think would have been helpful to me when I started getting into the hobby. As always, I'm open to video suggestions if anyone wants to pop those into the comments. But that'll do it for this video, which should have been about 15 minutes and I think is running closer to 25. So for everyone that watched all the way through, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the support on the raffle. I appreciate all the views, likes, subscribers, etc. It's wild to me that over a year this has grown from being a very small channel to being still a small channel, but you know, there's 420 something of you at this point, which is cool. I really never thought I'd have any sort of audience at all. So I really do appreciate that, and your continued watchership, viewership, support, all that is, it means a lot. So thank you. I appreciate it, and that'll do it for this one. I'll see you eventually. Bye.